Imagine this. You've just married the love of your life, and only days later, he gets an incredible work opportunity in the USA. Now here's the dilemma. If you were in Rhoda's shoes, would you let your husband leave so soon after your wedding, or would you ask him to stay? But wait. After Derrick's departure, something tragic and completely unexpected happens. What could it be? Stay tuned to uncover the full story. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next gripping content. Now let's dive into the full story. The Hilton ballroom was dazzling. Gold chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the polished marble floors reflected the elegance of the graduating class of Kingston University. Among the sea of caps and gowns, Derrick spotted her, Rhoda. Her crimson dress clung to her figure with effortless grace, and her laughter seemed to light up the room. Derrick, dressed in a tailored navy suit, felt a magnetic pull toward her. As the jazz band played softly in the background, he approached her with a drink in hand. "Congratulations," he said, his voice steady but his heart racing. "Thank you," Rhoda replied, her smile warm enough to melt glaciers. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, each word weaving an invisible thread between them. By the end of the evening they exchanged contacts. Derrick left with her number saved in his phone and her laugh echoing in his mind. That night, under the stars of the luxury penthouse where the university had hosted its gala dinner, Derrick texted her. "It was lovely meeting you tonight. Let's not make this the last time." Her reply came swiftly. "Only if you promise to call." He did. He called the next morning, the morning after that, and every morning for weeks. The next 2 years were a whirlwind of love. Derrick and Rhoda became inseparable, their dates often set in luxurious venues. Rooftop dinners overlooking the city, private yacht rides at sunset, and weekends at exotic resorts. During one candlelit dinner at the Savoy, Derrick surprised her with a delicate bracelet engraved with the words, "For every day there's us." Rhoda's eyes glistened as she whispered, "You're incredible, Derrick." But life was not without its challenges. Derrick struggled to find stable work after graduation. His dreams of becoming a top-tier engineer felt like distant mirages. Meanwhile, Rhoda excelled in hospitality, quickly landing a managerial role at the prestigious Le Jardin restaurant. Her income, though modest compared to their dreams, became the backbone of their shared life. Derrick's shoes began to wear out, his suits fraying at the edges. One evening, as Rhoda handed him a brand new pair of leather Oxfords, he looked into her eyes and said, "Your grateful heart will be rewarded one day. Never stop helping me. There are 365 days, Rhoda. One day will be ours. Keep doing me good." Rhoda kissed him softly, her faith in him unshaken. Their love culminated in an intimate courthouse wedding, witnessed by close friends and family. The reception was held in the Garden of the White Orchid, a boutique hotel known for its floral beauty. Under the glow of fairy lights, they vowed to build their dreams together. But their dreams would soon be tested in ways neither of them could foresee. The honeymoon phase of Derrick and Rhoda's marriage was a sweet memory etched in their hearts, but reality soon tightened its grip. Their modest apartment in the bustling city was cozy but far from the luxurious backdrops where their love had bloomed. Rhoda's hospitality job at Le Jardin restaurant kept the household afloat, while Derrick spent his days job hunting and his nights sketching engineering designs on their small dining table. "You'll see, Rhoda," he said one evening, holding up a blueprint with ink-smudged hands. "One day, these designs will build skyscrapers." Rhoda smiled as she placed a plate of steaming oxtail stew in front of him. "And I'll be there to celebrate with you every step of the way." But Derrick's failures weighed heavily on him. Weeks turned to months and months into years. His shoes wore thin, his suits frayed further, and his self-esteem eroded like a crumbling wall. Rhoda noticed. She noticed the way he hesitated to look her in the eyes when she handed him money to replace his worn-out shoes. She noticed the deep sighs he let out when he thought she wasn't listening. But she never stopped believing in him. "Your grateful heart will be rewarded one day," Derrick would say, trying to mask his shame with words of appreciation. "There are 365 days, Rhoda. One day will be ours. Keep doing me good. And so she did. 2 years into their marriage, Rhoda gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Samuel. The arrival of their son brought joy but also added pressure. Diapers, formula, and medical bills chipped away at Rhoda's modest salary. Still, she held the family together with unwavering love. Their apartment began to feel too small for their growing family, but there were no immediate solutions in sight. Derrick was still without work, and though he occasionally picked up odd jobs, it wasn't enough to make a dent in their financial struggles. Then came the day everything changed. One bright morning, as Rhoda bustled in the kitchen preparing Samuel's breakfast, Derrick received a phone call. The voice on the other end belonged to Mr. Henson, the director of a local engineering firm. "Mr. Derrick, we've reviewed your portfolio and would like to offer you a position with our team," Mr. Henson said. Derrick nearly dropped the phone. His hands trembled as he stammered out his gratitude. The salary wasn't extravagant, but it was enough to breathe life back into their dreams. With his first paycheck, Derrick surprised Rhoda with a gold bracelet engraved with the words, "For every struggle, there's us." They celebrated at the Velvet Terrace, a restaurant perched high above the city skyline. As they sipped champagne, Rhoda gazed at Derrick with tears in her eyes. "I never doubted you, Derrick," she said softly. "I wouldn't be here without you," he replied. "And I promise, this is only the beginning." True to his word, Derrick's career began to flourish. Months later, he had saved enough to fulfill one of their long-held dreams, opening a small restaurant for Rhoda. Rhoda's Haven quickly became a community favorite, its charm and impeccable service a testament to Rhoda's talent and dedication. Life seemed to settle into a comfortable rhythm. Derrick's job provided stability, and Rhoda's restaurant brought her a sense of purpose and pride. They welcomed their second son, Alfred, into the world, completing their family. But just as they began to bask in their hard-earned happiness, an opportunity arose that threatened to disrupt their peace. One evening, Derrick received an email from a prestigious American construction company offering him a position that promised not only a significant salary increase but also the chance to work on groundbreaking projects. The offer felt like a golden ticket to the life they had always envisioned, a life of luxury, security, and endless possibilities. But there was a catch. The job required Derrick to relocate to the United States alone for the first few years. When Derrick shared the news with Rhoda, her face fell. "You're asking me to let you go, just when we've finally found our footing." He took her hands in his and looked into her eyes, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Are you going to let this opportunity pass us by? Something that can change our life forever. Please let me go, Rhoda. After some time I'll come and take you and the kids with me." Her heart ached, but she knew he was right. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about Samuel and Alfred, about securing a future where their children would never have to struggle as they had. With encouragement from friends and family, Rhoda finally relented. As she hugged Derrick tightly before his departure, she whispered, "Don't forget us, Derrick." "Never," he promised. But life, as they were about to learn, had a way of testing promises. The day Derrick boarded the flight to America, the airport was abuzz with the hum of travelers. Rhoda stood by the large glass windows, holding little Alfred in her arms while Samuel clutched her dress. Derrick knelt in front of his sons, his eyes heavy with emotion. "Be good for your mother," he said, his voice cracking. "When I return, life will be better for all of us." He turned to Rhoda, his fingers brushing her cheek. "I'll send for you, I promise." Rhoda nodded, swallowing back the tears that threatened to spill. She didn't trust herself to speak. As Derrick walked away, her heart felt as though it was breaking into 1,000 pieces. Derrick's arrival in the United States was both exhilarating and overwhelming. New York City was a world of its own. Towering skyscrapers, blinding lights, and a pace so fast it left little room for hesitation. The company had provided a modest apartment for him in the heart of Manhattan, a stark contrast to the cramped quarters he had left behind in Africa. He threw himself into his work, earning accolades from his peers and supervisors. His talent for designing innovative infrastructure earned him a reputation as one of the most promising engineers on the team. But success came at a cost. Back home, Rhoda adjusted to life without Derrick. Running Rhoda's haven while raising 2 young boys was no small feat, but she managed with grace. Derrick sent money regularly, along with parcels of gifts for the boys. Each package came with a handwritten note. "For the boys and for you, my love. Remember, every day apart brings us closer to the life we dreamed of." But as the months turned into years, the physical distance began to strain their bond. Derrick's calls became less frequent, his messages shorter. Rhoda tried to ignore the growing ache in her chest, chalking it up to his busy schedule. Then came the whispers. "Are you sure he's not building a new life over there?" one of Rhoda's friends asked during a casual lunch at the restaurant. Rhoda forced a smile, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, in New York, Derrick was facing a dilemma of his own. During a casual evening with his colleagues, the topic of legal status came up. "You'll need to get a green card if you want to stay here long-term," one of his friends advised over drinks at a rooftop bar. The city's skyline twinkled like a million diamonds in the background. Derrick frowned. "I've already applied for one. It's just a matter of time." His friend shook his head. "Time is money, Derrick. The faster you get it, the faster you can move up the ladder. You have 2 options. Marry a citizen or pay a hefty sum for expedited processing." Derrick felt a knot tighten in his chest. "I can't marry someone here. Have a wife, a family. Think of it as a formality," another friend chimed in. "Plenty of people do it. It doesn't have to mean anything." Derrick left the bar that night feeling conflicted. He knew the decision could either catapult him further toward the dreams he shared with Rhoda or unravel the very foundation of their relationship. Weeks later, during a gala event hosted by his company, Derrick met Evelyn. She was stunning, blonde, poised, and confident. The daughter of a real estate magnate, Evelyn moved in circles Derrick had only dreamed of. Their initial conversations were professional, but her interest in him was evident. Derrick resisted at first, but the pressure from his friends and the lure of securing his future began to chip away at his resolve. "Are you really going to let a technicality hold you back?" one friend asked during another late-night gathering. Eventually Derrick gave in. Evelyn and Derrick's marriage was a quiet affair, a transaction more than a celebration. He justified it to himself as a necessary step for his family's future. But with time the lines blurred. Evelyn's wealth and charm were intoxicating, and Derrick found himself drawn into her world of luxury. Back in Africa, Rhoda began to notice subtle changes. Derrick's once frequent calls dwindled to sporadic texts. When she asked about his return, he dodged the question. One evening, as she sat in the living room with Samuel and Alfred, Samuel asked, "When is Dad coming back?" Rhoda's throat tightened. "Soon, my love. Very soon." But even she wasn't sure anymore. The once unbreakable bond between Derrick and Rhoda was fraying, and both were acutely aware of it. And yet, neither of them could foresee the storm that was about to tear their lives apart. Time passed, but the distance between Derrick and Rhoda grew wider with every unspoken truth. Rhoda, ever hopeful, clung to Derrick's promises while juggling the responsibilities of motherhood and managing Rhoda's haven. Her faith in their love had always been her anchor, but lately, that anchor felt like it was drifting. One afternoon, while sorting through parcels Derrick had sent, Rhoda noticed a subtle change. The gifts were still thoughtful. A toy car for Samuel, a storybook for Alfred, and a silk scarf for her, but they lacked the personal notes she cherished. She traced her fingers over the fabric of the scarf, her heart heavy with questions she couldn't answer. Meanwhile, in New York, Derrick's life with Evelyn was evolving. What had begun as a marriage of convenience slowly morphed into something more. Evelyn introduced him to a world of affluence he had never imagined. Galas, private jets, and sprawling mansions with pools as vast as lakes. Derrick, once a humble dreamer, found himself seduced by the lifestyle. One evening, as they dined at an opulent rooftop restaurant, Evelyn raised her glass of champagne. "To us," she said, her eyes sparkling under the city lights. Derrick hesitated but clinked his glass against hers. He smiled, but his heart felt like a battlefield. Back in Africa, Rhoda's doubts began to solidify. It started with the infrequent calls, then the occasional missed remittance. Then one evening, as she scrolled through social media, she stumbled upon a tagged photo of Derrick. Her heart stopped. In the photo, he stood beside Evelyn, his arm draped casually over her shoulder. They were at a lavish charity gala, smiling for the camera like a picture-perfect couple. Rhoda's hands trembled as she stared at the image. Was this the same man who had promised to return to her and their boys? The same man who had vowed to build their dreams together? She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she packed a small bag, kissed her children goodbye, and told her sister she needed to handle something urgent. When Rhoda arrived in New York, the city's chaos matched the storm inside her. She had traced Derrick to his office building and waited outside, her heart pounding with a mix of anger, fear, and anticipation. When Derrick emerged, he froze at the sight of her. "Rhoda," he stammered, his face pale. She walked up to him, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "You've been lying to me, Derrick. All this time I believed in you, trusted you. But now," her voice broke as she held up her phone, showing him the photo. Derrick glanced around, his colleagues and passers-by beginning to notice the commotion. He grabbed her arm gently. "Let's talk somewhere private," he said, leading her to a nearby cafe. As they sat across from each other, Derrick tried to explain. "Rhoda, it wasn't supposed to be like this. The marriage was a formality to get my green card. Nothing more." Rhoda's voice was sharp. "Nothing more? You call living with another woman nothing more? You call abandoning your children nothing more?" "I didn't abandon you," Derrick argued, though his tone lacked conviction. "I sent money, didn't I?" "You sent money, Derrick. But you stopped sending yourself," she interrupted. For the first time, Derrick had no response. The weight of his choices pressed down on him like a vice. That night, Rhoda left Derrick at the cafe and returned to her hotel. She cried until her body ached, the betrayal cutting deeper than any wound she had ever known. The next morning, she booked a flight back to Africa. She couldn't bear to stay in a city where her dreams had turned to ash. But Derrick's world was unraveling too. Evelyn discovered Rhoda's visit through a mutual friend and confronted Derrick. "You lied to me," she spat, her voice cold and sharp. "You said your past was behind you." Their marriage, already fragile, crumbled under the weight of deception. Evelyn filed for divorce, taking their children and a significant portion of Derrick's wealth. Months later, Derrick returned to Africa. His once proud frame was stooped, his face etched with lines of regret. He had suffered a stroke, leaving him physically weakened and emotionally broken. Word of his return spread quickly, and when Rhoda heard, she felt a mix of emotions: anger, pity, and a lingering love she couldn't entirely extinguish. She visited him in the hospital, her heart heavy with memories. When Derrick saw her, tears streamed down his face. "Rhoda," he choked out, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I was a fool. I hurt you, betrayed you. But please forgive me." Rhoda stared at him, her emotions warring within her. Could she forgive the man who had shattered her heart, or was this where their story truly ended? The hospital room was cold and sterile, its white walls adorned with only a single clock, ticking away the seconds. Rhoda sat at the edge of the bed, her eyes locked onto Derrick's frail frame. He looked like a shadow of the man she had once loved. His skin pale, his body thinner than she remembered, his left arm immobile from the stroke. For a long moment there was silence between them. Derrick's tears flowed freely, his trembling hand reaching out for hers. "Rhoda," he began again, his voice hoarse and filled with regret. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Failed you, failed our children. But please let me tell you." She raised a hand to stop him, her expression unreadable. "Do you think saying sorry will undo the years of pain, Derrick? Do you think it will erase the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why you stopped loving me? Her voice was steady, but each word carried the weight of her anguish. I never stopped loving you, Derrick whispered, his voice breaking. I was lost, blinded by ambition, by greed. I thought I was building a better future for us, but instead I destroyed everything. Rhoda's chest tightened. She had longed for these words, but hearing them now only reignited the fury and heartbreak she had worked so hard to bury. You married another woman, Derrick, she said, her tone sharp. You had children with her while I raised our sons alone. And then you abandoned us. You abandoned me. Outside the hospital, life moved on. Cars honked, vendors shouted, and the sun shone brightly, oblivious to the storm brewing inside Rhoda. She stood at the window, staring out at the bustling world as memories flooded her mind. She thought of the day she first met Derrick at their graduation ceremony. His bright smile, the way he had nervously asked for her contact. She thought of the countless nights they had spent dreaming of a life filled with love and prosperity. She thought of his promise. There are 365 days, Rhoda. One of them will be our day. But their day had never come. Instead, she had endured years of loneliness, raising Samuel and Alfred with nothing but her sheer will and unwavering faith. Behind her, Derrick coughed softly. I don't have much time, Rhoda, he admitted, his voice weak. The doctors. They don't think I'll recover fully. All I want now is a chance to make things right, even if it's just to say I'm sorry. Rhoda turned to face him, her arms crossed. And what do you want from me, Derrick? To forgive you. To take you back after everything you've done. He looked down, his shame evident. I don't deserve to be taken back. But I hope, no, I pray, you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Not for my sake but for yours. Carrying anger. It will only hurt you more. Her eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them away quickly. His words struck a chord, but they also felt like an echo of her own prayers during the years he was gone. God, help me forgive, even when it feels impossible, she had often whispered. As night fell, Rhoda found herself back at her small restaurant, Rhoda's Haven. The place was alive with chatter and laughter, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the air. Samuel and Alfred sat at a corner table, working on their homework. She watched them for a moment, her heart swelling with pride. They were her greatest accomplishment, the reason she had endured. But she also saw the hole in their lives where a father should have been. Mom, Samuel called, his voice pulling her from her thoughts. When's Dad coming home? Rhoda froze. She hadn't told them the full story, hadn't explained why their father's promises to return had turned to silence. But she knew they deserved the truth. Soon, she said softly, though the word felt heavy in her mouth. The next morning, Rhoda returned to the hospital. Derrick was sitting up in bed, his eyes brightening slightly when he saw her. I've thought about what you said, she began, sitting down beside him. And you're right. Anger won't change the past. It won't heal what's broken. Derrick's lips trembled. Does that mean? I'm not saying I forgive you yet, she interrupted, her tone firm. Forgiveness is a process, Derrick. It's not something I can give you in a single moment. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll wait. Rhoda looked at him, her heart conflicted. Could she truly let go of the pain he had caused? Could she find the strength to forgive the man who had once been her everything? As she walked out of the hospital room, one question lingered in her mind, a question she would pose to her audience later. If you were in my shoes, would you forgive him? The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions for Rhoda. Each day, she visited Derrick in the hospital, torn between her lingering anger and the faint hope of closure. Derrick, once vibrant and confident, was now humbled, his every word and action reflecting the weight of his guilt. One afternoon, she arrived to find him struggling to write something in a notebook. His hands shook as he gripped the pen, his once steady engineer's hands now betraying him. What are you doing? She asked, her voice softer than she intended. Derrick looked up, his face lighting up with a faint smile. Writing a letter, he said, gesturing weakly toward the pages. For the boys. In case I don't. Rhoda's chest tightened. Don't say that, she interrupted, moving closer. You're going to fight this. You'll get better. I don't know if I will, Derrick admitted, his voice trembling. But if I don't, they deserve to know the truth. They deserve to hear from me, even if I wasn't the father they needed. Rhoda said nothing, her gaze falling to the notebook. The words on the page were messy, the letters uneven, but the sentiment was clear. Derrick was pouring his heart into it, trying to leave behind something meaningful for Samuel and Alfred. That evening, Rhoda sat by the window of her modest yet cozy bedroom, staring out at the sprawling city lights. Memories of their early days together flooded her mind. The way Derrick had always looked at her as if she were his entire world, the promises they had made to each other during quiet nights under the stars. She reached for her phone and played a voice note he had sent her years ago, shortly before leaving for the United States. Rhoda, my love, you're my everything. Every step I take is for us, for our future. I'll come back to you. Promise. Just hold on for me. The words now felt like a cruel joke, yet they stirred something in her. A longing for the man he once was, not the man he had become. The next morning, Rhoda decided to confront Derrick with questions she had buried for years. When she arrived at the hospital, she found him sitting up, looking out the window at the bustling city below. Derrick, she began, her voice steady, I need to understand something. When did you stop thinking about us? When did we become less important than your ambitions? Derrick sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. I never stopped thinking about you, he said. Not a day went by that I didn't miss you and the boys. But I got caught up in something I thought was bigger than us. I wanted to give you the world, Rhoda, but I lost myself along the way. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with remorse. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want you to know that every decision I made, even the wrong ones, came from a place of wanting more for us. I see now that I lost sight of what really mattered. Rhoda studied him, her emotions a tangled web of hurt and empathy. And Evelyn? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Was she part of that wanting more? Derrick closed his eyes, shame washing over him. No, he said finally. She was a mistake. A mistake that cost me everything. Over the next few days, Derrick's health began to improve slightly, enough for him to be discharged from the hospital. Rhoda decided to bring him home, not out of obligation, but because she couldn't bring herself to abandon him entirely. Samuel and Alfred were hesitant when they saw him. Is Dad staying with us now? Alfred asked, his innocent eyes wide with curiosity. For a while, Rhoda replied carefully. He needs our help. Derrick, using a cane to support himself, knelt awkwardly before his sons. I know I haven't been the father you deserve, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I want to try to make it right if you'll let me. The boys exchanged a look, then nodded slowly. Samuel stepped forward, wrapping his arms around Derrick in a tentative hug. Alfred followed, his smaller arms clinging tightly. For the first time in years, Derrick felt a glimmer of hope. One evening, as they all sat together at the dining table, Derrick asked Rhoda a question that caught her off guard. Do you remember the day we signed our marriage certificate? Rhoda paused, then nodded. Do. You told me, we're not just signing paper, Rhoda. We're signing our future. Derrick smiled faintly. I wish I'd remembered that when I left. I thought I was chasing our future, but all I did was abandon it. Rhoda didn't respond immediately. Her gaze focused on the flickering candlelight on the table. Finally, she said, You still have a chance to prove those words, Derrick. But it won't be easy. Derrick nodded solemnly. I'm willing to try. Whatever it takes. As the night wore on, Rhoda found herself asking the same question she would later pose to her audience. Is forgiveness a gift for the one who hurt you, or a way to set yourself free? Derrick's presence in Rhoda's home created a complex rhythm that neither of them could quite adjust to. Days turned into weeks, and though his body was healing slowly, the emotional scars left behind by years of neglect and betrayal seemed deeper than ever. Rhoda watched him one morning as he shuffled through the living room, his cane tapping softly against the polished wooden floor. He paused by the family photo that hung on the wall, an old picture of Rhoda, Samuel, and Alfred from years ago. "Where would my face have fit in this?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of regret and longing. Rhoda, busy arranging flowers on the dining table, stopped and turned toward him. "It wasn't just about where your face fit, Derrick. It was about where your heart was. And for years, it wasn't here with us." Her words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Derrick nodded, acknowledging the truth in them. "I know I failed you, Rhoda. Failed all of you. But I want to spend whatever time I have left proving to you that I can be better." Rhoda didn't reply immediately. Instead, she walked to the window and stared out at the bustling street below. Her mind wandered back to the years she had spent praying for Derrick, hoping he would return. But now that he was here, she found herself questioning whether the man standing before her was someone she could ever fully trust again. That afternoon, Rhoda took Derrick to the small restaurant she had built from scratch. Rhoda's haven was more than just a place of business. It was a sanctuary, a testament to her resilience. "Welcome to my world," she said, gesturing proudly at the cozy yet elegant interior. The walls were painted a warm cream color, adorned with hand-painted murals of vibrant flowers and scenic landscapes. Tables were neatly arranged, each with a vase of fresh roses. Derrick looked around, his eyes wide with admiration. This is incredible, Rhoda. You built all of this." "Every bit of it," she replied, her voice laced with pride. "While you were chasing dreams in America, I was here, holding our family together." "I'm sorry I wasn't here to help you," Derrick said, his voice heavy with guilt. Rhoda turned to him, her gaze steady. "Sorry doesn't rebuild trust, Derrick. It doesn't erase the pain." "I know," he admitted, his shoulders slumping. "But I want to try." Later that evening, Derrick insisted on helping Samuel and Alfred with their homework. It was a small gesture, but one that left a mark on both the boys and Rhoda. She watched from the doorway as he patiently explained a math problem to Samuel, his voice calm and encouraging. "See, when you break it down, it's not so scary," Derrick said, smiling at his son. Samuel grinned back, the first sign of genuine warmth he had shown toward his father since his return. Alfred, sitting nearby, looked up and asked, "Dad, are you going to stay with us forever now?" Derrick hesitated, the question catching him off guard. He glanced at Rhoda, who was still watching silently from the doorway. "That's up to your mom," he said finally. Rhoda's heart clenched. She appreciated his honesty, but it didn't make her decision any easier. One night, as they sat on the porch under the stars, Derrick turned to Rhoda. "Do you remember what I used to say about 365 days? Rhoda gave a small, bittersweet smile. "You said, 1 day will be our Dave." He nodded, his eyes misty. "I never stopped believing that. Even when I was making mistakes, even when I was far away, I always held on to the hope that one day I could make things right." Rhoda looked at him, her emotions a tangled mess. "Derrick, hope isn't enough. Actions matter. Choices matter. And the choices you made hurt all of us deeply." "I know," he said softly. "But I'm here now, and I want to spend every day proving to you that I've changed." As the days turned into weeks, Derrick began to show signs of genuine effort. He helped around the house, spent quality time with the boys, and even started assisting at Rhoda's haven. Slowly, the walls Rhoda had built around her heart began to crack. One evening, after a particularly busy day at the restaurant, Derrick surprised Rhoda with a bouquet of her favorite flowers, white lilies. "I know it doesn't fix everything," he said, handing them to her. "But I wanted to remind you how much I appreciate everything you've done for me, for us." Rhoda took the flowers, her heart softening despite herself. "You have a long way to go, Derrick. But maybe there's hope." Derrick smiled faintly. "That's all I need. A chance to earn back what I lost." Later that night, as Rhoda lay in bed, she reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the question that had haunted her for weeks. Could she truly forgive Derrick? And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what forgiveness might look like. Not for his sake, but for her own. Weeks turned into months, and Derrick's presence in Rhoda's life began to feel less like a disruption and more like a chapter she hadn't realized was still being written. His efforts to rebuild their fractured family were undeniable. He woke early to help with household chores, spent time tutoring Samuel and Alfred, and even managed to repair the creaky front gate that had annoyed Rhoda for years. At the restaurant, Derrick proved to be more than just a helping hand. He brought ideas to expand the menu, suggested introducing live music on weekends, and even organized a small renovation to modernize the dining area. Rhoda's haven started drawing more customers, and profits soared. Despite this, Rhoda remained cautious. Her heart, though softening, was still guarded. Late at night, she often found herself revisiting the past. The betrayal, the loneliness, the years of unanswered prayers. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't a destination. It was a journey, and she wasn't sure how far along the road she had traveled. If you were in Rhoda's shoes, would you forgive Derrick? Or would the pain of betrayal be too much to overcome? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and stay tuned for our next story.